Ever catch yourself like right when you're about to speak English, and your brain's kind of doing this super fast translation thing in the background?
Yeah, totally. Happens to so many English learners. It's like this hidden hurdle.
It really is, and it can feel like it's like totally blocking you from being fluent. So today, we're going deep on how to ditch that whole translation step and just start thinking straight up in English.
Exactly. We're talking about like rewiring your brain so it operates right inside the English language. No more detours through your native language.
Sounds intense.
It's a game changer, though, trust me.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Why is thinking in English such a big deal? Like, what's in it for our listeners? What are the actual benefits they can expect?
Well, first off, when you cut out that translation, your speaking just automatically gets faster and smoother.
No more lag.
Exactly. There's no more of that tiny pause while you're mentally like switching back and forth between languages. It's way more direct.
It's like trying to stream a movie on dial-up.
Yeah, totally. You need that high-speed connection for things to flow smoothly.
So it's not just speed, though, right? I bet it does wonders for your confidence, too, when you can just think and speak without that mental roadblock.
Oh, absolutely. When the words are just there, ready to go because you're thinking in English already, you just feel more comfortable and sure of yourself.
Yeah.
You're not second-guessing yourself all the time.
It's like you're finally free to just be yourself in English.
Exactly. And it goes beyond speaking, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it can really boost your listening skills as well.
That's interesting. How so?
Well, think about it. When your brain's already working in English mode, it can process spoken English so much faster.
It's already in the right gear, so to speak.
Exactly. Like, when you're watching a movie or something and you start to get all the little nuances?
Yeah.
You're not stopping to translate every single sentence. You're just kind of absorbing the meaning.
Your brain's on the same wavelength as the speaker.
Right. It's tuned into that English frequency.
Wow, I wouldn't have thought of that. So we've got speed, confidence, and better listening. Anything else?
Oh, there's more. It even helps with your pronunciation.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. When you're actively engaging with English in your head, your brain's also subconsciously picking up on all those sounds and rhythms.
You're like internally rehearsing how to sound more like a native speaker.
Exactly. It's like muscle memory, but for your mouth.
I like that analogy. So to sum it up, training your brain to think in English can lead to faster speaking, more confidence, better listening skills, and even clearer pronunciation.
That's right.
Okay, that's a pretty compelling list. So the big question is how you actually make that shift happen. How do you rewire your brain to think in English?
It's definitely a process. It's not going to happen overnight.
Of course.
And before we dive into the how-to, it's super important to be aware of some common mistakes.
Oh, yeah. Those things we do that actually hold us back without even realizing it.
Exactly. Things that can prevent you from making that mental switch.
So what are some of those roadblocks that people should be aware of?
I think the biggest one is like relying too much on translation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you're constantly translating every little thing back and forth, your brain never really gets a chance to just think in English.
It's like you're always taking a detour instead of taking the direct route.
Precisely. And that can really slow you down in the long run.
So ditch the translator, get your brain used to working directly in English. Got it. What else? What other mistakes do people tend to make?
Another big one is like getting too hung up on grammar.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
A lot of learners, they focus so much on trying to construct perfect sentences in their heads.
That they end up getting totally tongue-tied.
Yeah. It's like they overthink it and it actually blocks their natural flow of thought.
It's like your inner critic takes over and just shuts everything down.
Exactly. And you know what? Even native English speakers don't always speak with perfect grammar.
True. It's more important to just be able to communicate your ideas.
Exactly. So don't let grammar be your enemy. It's more about fluency at this stage.
Okay, so we've got to ditch the translator and loosen up on the grammar rules. What else can trip people up when they're trying to think in English?
Well, this is a big one, and it can be tough. The fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah. That can be paralyzing.
Right. Some people, they're so worried about saying something wrong that they're almost afraid to even try.
They just clam up.
Exactly. And that's the worst thing you can do, because making mistakes is how we learn.
It's part of the process.
Exactly. You've got to be willing to put yourself out there, even if it means messing up sometimes.
It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall a few times before you get the hang of it.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the less you'll fall. Same with English.
Yeah.
The more you speak, the fewer mistakes you'll make.
Okay, so embrace the mistakes. They're stepping stones. Anything else we should be mindful of?
One last thing, and it's kind of connected to everything we've been talking about, a lack of immersion.
Like not surrounding yourself with enough English in your daily life.
Exactly. If you only use English during like specific study times, but the rest of your life is in your native language,
Yeah.
it's going to be really hard for your brain to just naturally switch over to thinking in English.
You need to make it a habit, something that's just part of your everyday life.
Exactly. Even little things like, switching your phone to English or listening to English music.
It's about making it a part of your environment.
Right. The more you expose yourself to English, the easier it'll be for your brain to start thinking in English. So just to recap, the big four mistakes: over-relying on translation, getting hung up on grammar, being afraid of making mistakes, and not having enough English in your daily life.
Okay, those are all great points. So now that we know what to avoid, let's get into the good stuff. How do we actually train our brains to think in English? What are some concrete steps people can take?
All right, let's get practical. So one really simple but powerful technique is just to start naming things around you in English.
Like as you go about your day?
Yeah. Just look around and mentally label everything you see.
Like table, chair, window, coffee cup.
Exactly. It's like building those basic connections in your brain.
Object, English word. Got it.
Right. And to take it a step further, try describing simple actions related to those objects.
Instead of just door, I'd think, I'm opening the door or I'm closing the door.
That's it. You're starting to put those words into action.
I like that. It's like building a foundation for more complex thoughts. Okay, what else?
Okay, step 2. Self-talk.
Like talking to myself.
Exactly. It might feel a bit weird at first, but trust me, it's super effective.
Because nobody can hear me, so there's no pressure.
Exactly. You can just let your thoughts flow freely in English.
So like if I'm making breakfast, I could be like, okay, I'm cracking the eggs now. Now I'm stirring them. A little salt and pepper.
Perfect. You're practicing forming those thoughts in English in real time.
I can see how that would help.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got naming things and talking to ourselves. What's next?
Next up is using an English-to-English dictionary.
Okay, so not translating the words into my native language.
Exactly. This one's all about staying within the English world.
So if I look up a word, I'll see its definition and examples all in English.
Right. And that forces your brain to process the meaning in English without taking that detour through translation.
It's like building those connections directly in your brain.
Precisely. It's like learning new vocabulary from context, but within the dictionary itself.
That's clever. Okay, what's the next step?
All right, number 4 is to start small. Don't try to think in these super long, complicated sentences right away.
Baby steps.
Exactly. Begin with simple thoughts like, I'm hungry, or it's sunny today.
Keep it short and sweet.
Right. And then you can gradually build up to more complex sentences as you get more comfortable.
So don't overwhelm yourself. Start simple, then build from there. Makes sense. What else?
This one might sound a little strange, but it's super helpful. Try to develop an English inner voice.
You mean like the voice in my head?
Exactly. Instead of thinking in your native language, make a conscious effort to think in English.
So like those little thoughts that pop into my head throughout the day.
Yeah, like, what should I have for lunch today? Or, I need to remember to send that email.
Basically, make English the default language for my inner monologue.
That's it. It's like creating your own little English world inside your head.
That's a cool concept. Okay, what's the final piece of advice for training your brain to think in English?
This one's kind of a no-brainer. Immerse yourself in English as much as possible.
Yeah, we touched on this earlier. It's about making English a constant part of your life.
Exactly. Watch English movies and TV shows, listen to English music and podcasts, read English books and articles.
Whatever you enjoy, just do it in English.
Right. The more you surround yourself with the language, the more natural it will feel to think in English.
So to quickly recap, we've got 6 key strategies. Naming things in English, self-talk, using an English-to-English dictionary, starting with simple sentences, developing an English inner voice, and immersing yourself in the language.
That's a great summary.
Okay, so those are the strategies. But knowing them is only half the battle, right? It's the consistent practice that really makes the difference.
Absolutely. You need to turn these strategies into habits.
So what are some specific exercises people can do on a daily basis to make thinking in English a regular part of their lives?
Well, one really effective exercise is to bookend your day with English thoughts.
What do you mean by that?
Start your day by thinking about your plans in English.
Like, okay, first I'm going to have some coffee, then I'm going to work on that project.
Exactly. And then do the same thing before you go to bed.
reflect on my day in English.
Right. It's like setting the tone for your day and then reviewing it in English.
I like that. It's like making a conscious effort to start and end the day in English mode. Okay, what else?
Another good one is to have a set time each day where you just completely ban translation.
Like a no translation zone.
Exactly. Even if it's just for 15 or 20 minutes, make a rule that during that time, you will only think in English.
That's a cool challenge. It forces you to really stay in that English mindset.
Exactly. And you know what? It gets easier the more you do it.
Your brain starts to adapt.
Right. Okay, here's another exercise.
Yeah.
Talk to yourself out loud in English.
We talked about self-talk before, but this is like taking it a step further.
Exactly. It's about actually verbalizing those English thoughts.
So I'm basically narrating my life in English.
That's it. It might feel a bit silly at first, but it's great for strengthening those connections in your brain.
And again, nobody's listening, so no judgment.
Right. Okay, here's a good one for those times when your mind might tend to wander. Use those moments to practice thinking in English.
So like when I'm doing the dishes or taking a shower or commuting to work.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your thoughts, even during those mundane activities.
Instead of letting my mind drift, I can use those moments to practice my English.
Exactly. And last but not least, keep a journal in English.
We talked about this earlier too, but this is more about consistently writing in English, right?
Right. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just jot down your thoughts, your to-do list, whatever comes to mind.
The important thing is to get those thoughts down on paper in English.
Exactly. It's a great way to track your progress and see how far you've come.
Okay, so we've got 5 daily exercises. Start and end your day with English thoughts. Have a no translation zone. Talk to yourself out loud in English. Think in English during everyday activities. And keep a journal in English.
That's a great list.
And the key is to be consistent, right?
Absolutely. Like any new skill, it takes time and effort to master thinking in English.
And it's probably going to be a bit bumpy along the way.
Oh, definitely. Not always easy, but it's so worth it.
So what are some of the challenges people might encounter as they're trying to shift to thinking in English? And more importantly, how can they overcome those challenges?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is simply our natural inclination to revert back to our native language.
Like it's our comfort zone.
Exactly. It's what we're used to. So the key here is patience and starting small.
Don't expect to be fluent overnight.
Right. Focus on those simple words and phrases at first. And keep that English to English dictionary handy.
It's like training wheels for your brain.
Exactly. And another common challenge is that feeling of being stuck when you don't know the right word.
Like, you know what you want to say, but you just can't find the word in English.
Exactly. It can be so frustrating.
So what do you do in those situations?
Well, instead of immediately switching to your native language, try to describe the word using simpler English words that you do know.
So, like, if I can't remember the word refrigerator, I could say, that cold box where we keep food.
Perfect. You're still thinking and communicating in English.
I like that. It keeps the momentum going. What other challenges might people face?
Well, this one's a bit more mental, but it's really common. Feeling discouraged when you don't see results fast enough.
It's easy to get demotivated when you feel like you're not making progress.
Exactly. And the thing is, progress with language learning can be slow and subtle.
It's not always obvious.
Right. So it's important to find ways to track your progress, even those small victories.
Like, what are some ways people can do that?
Well, keeping a journal is a great way to see how your writing is improving over time. You could also record yourself speaking English and listen back to it after a few weeks.
That's a great idea. You can really hear the difference.
Exactly. And just pay attention to how often you find yourself thinking in English naturally.
Like, if you catch yourself thinking in English without even trying, that's a huge win.
It is. It means you're making progress even if you don't always realize it.
So basically, the key to overcoming these challenges is to be patient, consistent, resourceful, and celebrate those small wins along the way.
That's a great way to put it.
Thinking in English is a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely. And it's a journey worth taking.
So to our listeners out there who are on this journey, remember, start small, be consistent, and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Embrace the process.
Exactly. And if you're feeling stuck, come back to this episode and remind yourself of those key strategies and exercises.
And you know what? I'd encourage you to think about which of these tips really resonated with you today.
Yeah, what felt like something you could actually start doing right now?
Exactly. And maybe that's your starting point, that one little change you can make today to start shifting your mindset towards thinking in English.
It all starts with that first step. Thanks Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure being here.